Hi, how you doing? This is Charles Kelly. Hope you're having a good day. Today I'm just here at an industrial estate. I'm on an appointment, and I'm looking around here, and all I can see is empty car parking spaces. In fact, the spaces behind me are actually for RBS, which is NatWest, and down there is Lombard, who are sort of a lending arm of NatWest and RBS. And over there, you can just see empty spaces, can't you? It's this place is normally brimming with cars, and you wouldn't be able to park anywhere. But it is looking pretty empty to me, and it's a popular industrial estate. It's very near main roads, town centres, not far from Watford. It's on the A41. It's got train links, everything you'd want in a good industrial estate. But it just shows you what's going on, that more people I expect are working from home, and more office space is going to be left empty and dormant. In fact, this comes on the back of an announcement today by Pizza Express, who are getting rid of 67 branches and 1,100 staff in a massive CVA, company voluntary arrangement, which is a bit like a halfway arrangement towards bankruptcy. You might call it Chapter 11 in America, or an IVA, which is an individual voluntary arrangement. You're not actually going under completely, but you are restructuring the debt. So everything's put on hold, and administrators then can renegotiate with your debtors, and you can come out the other end freed up from some of the debt and restructuring other parts of the debt. And of course, if it doesn't work, if the creditors say no and enough of them just refuse, then the company could be wound up, or the individual could be made bankrupt. In practice, usually they do work, because the creditors are probably going to get less if they wound the company up or made somebody bankrupt than they would if somebody is at least trying to pay off some of the debt. But a lot of the debt gets written off, a lot of tax gets written off, VAT, and in the case of Pizza Express, they are mainly renegotiating with their landlords. They've got over 400 branches, and they will probably close 15% of them, and the others will probably just be, or will be, kept open, but on lower rents. What they're saying is, well, look, we're earning less, we can't afford to pay you the same rent, we want to pay you less. I mean, clearly a restaurant can't survive on 30% capacity. They need to be full, and they can't do that at the moment. They've also lost money this year, they've been closed for a long time. There's no way they can survive and pay the same rents. Rents for these commercial type of premises have been going up over the last few years, and expect to go up all the time. I mean, landlords come back and say, right, we're renewing your lease, we're putting your rents up by X amount, and everyone kicks and screams, and then they negotiate something. But the landlord never comes back and says, we're going to reduce your rent. It's always going up. So that's the way it's been for hundreds of years, and now it's reversing. So if you're investing in commercial property with a good tenant like Pizza Express, the banks would lend you money. They would consider that to be a safe covenant, a blue chip covenant, and you'd be able to borrow money against the rent, the expected rent, and it would be considered a blue chip safe investment, the type of investment that pension funds make, in fact. And now it's all reversing, it's all changing, because the rents are going to go down for the first time in I don't know how long, but I've never seen a situation where rents went down like this across the board. And it's quite serious. You could say, well, who cares about some landlord that's going to lose money? Well, I care, because, well, first of all, I'm a landlord. I haven't got Pizza Express as my tenant, but it will affect things like pension funds, because many of I don't know who owns this industrial estate, but I would imagine it would be probably originally owned by a pension fund, like a Legal & General and Aviva, or one of the big funds, and they're making money for their pension policyholders, individuals and companies that rely on the growth in these funds to pay their pension and to give them a pension pot. So people will be affected. The pension pot's going to be smaller. It might even affect people who are drawing pensions. especially if they're in kind of schemes where they're drawdown schemes where the money is invested into property funds like this, which, let's face it, would have been considered to be very, very safe and secure. These are blue chip investments. I used to work for some of these large insurance companies, and I know the type of things they invest in, and they invest in long-term projects, not with huge yields and huge returns, but safe, steady returns over many, many years. And now it's all changing. So what's going to happen? Well, I think there's going to be a lot of sad landlords out there. Now, obviously, companies like Legal & General and Land Securities will not go under, but there are a lot of companies that have debts themselves. Landlords borrow money to buy these properties, and they may not be able to service these debts. We've seen this already with Into, the giant retail landlord that owns massive retail parks, parks that you can spend all day walking around and still never see the other end of them. Well, they own these properties, and they're let out to retailers, and they are suffering. And I think Into have almost gone into administration, haven't they? That's a big shock. But companies like Land Security have been around. They're a blue chip property company. However, even then, pension funds and unit trusts and policies would be investing in companies like Land Securities. They would hold shares in companies like Land Securities, FTSE 100 index companies, blue chip companies, and they would consider Land Securities to be a safe investment. So very few people are going to get a get out of jail card here. Most people are going to be affected by this pandemic-driven recession. And Pizza Express is very sad. They're a very successful company. I expect they're owned by one of these management buyout companies that have managed to accumulate £1 billion worth of debt. So in a way, the business is crumbling under its debt rather than its trading performance. Without that £1 billion of debt, I'm sure that they would probably be able to continue without too many difficulties. They'd probably be able to survive this. But when a company has £1 billion of debt, and I don't know what the repayments on £1 billion worth of debt, but it must be quite high. I mean, think about it. If you were paying 10% rent, that would be 100 million a year. 10% interest, even at 5%, 50 million a year, just in interest. I mean, it's a lot of money. So you could just imagine that they're just crumbling under the weight of this debt. And it's the same with individuals. When you've got a lot of personal debt, a lot of credit card debt, then when things happen, when things go wrong, you will sink because of that debt. So that's the message, really. Don't get yourself into so much debt and credit card debt, because that will end up coming back to bite you in years when things go wrong, like now. Because every few years there's always a recession. People have been predicting a recession for quite a while. I know some people predict more recessions than there are, but it's a cycle, isn't it? It's a cycle of things that go on, and recessions, because economies grow, they overheat, then they pull back, and in this case it's been triggered by this pandemic. And I was saying there was going to be a recession for the last year or so, and I said it could be something that triggers it. It can be an event like a war, or I didn't say a pandemic, but that's the type of thing that can trigger these recessions, and that's exactly what's happened here. And this looks like it's going to be a bad one. It could even go into a depression, a long-term deep recession that could go into depression. I mean, look here, this is Lombard. This is a very successful company. I've borrowed money from Lombard when I had company cars on leases. They're a very highly profitable company, and I can't see anybody in these offices. They're probably, a lot of people are working from home, but I expect a lot of people will be working from home, but they've got one foot out of the door, if you like, and they may not be coming back to work because the companies are going to just have to tighten their belts, pull in the reins, and find cheaper ways of running the business. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to survive. Pizza Express is saying that if they can get out of this arrangement in one piece, that it will save thousands of jobs. It will save 8,000 jobs. So they're sacrificing 1,100 jobs to save 8,000 jobs, like you sacrifice pawns on a chessboard. And that's what it really comes down to. The workers in this are just the pawns on a chessboard being moved about. and that's the way it's been. That's the way it's always been. However, at least in the UK, we have the safety net. We have the furlough scheme, but we also have the benefit system, which gives people a safety net. It's not a lifestyle choice, obviously, but well, it is for some people, unfortunately. But for others, it's more a thing of, if you lose everything, at least you've got some income coming in. At least you can get a property in a room, I've got tenants who are in rooms which are paid for by the state, but these people previously had their own flats, their own houses, their own properties in some cases, their own businesses. So it's already hurting people. And at least we have that safety net here, albeit be it paid by the taxpayer through higher taxes. But in some countries you haven't got that. I'm hearing stories in Asia and other countries where things are really bad. People are literally on the street, begging, sleeping on the street. And America has had this income support scheme, $600 a week, $30,000 a year, which is coming to an end, or may have come to an end. And when that's pulled, that's going to be really difficult for people. They've also had a scheme like we've had here, where you cannot evict a tenant through non-payment of rent, and mortgage companies can't evict people who are not paying their mortgage. They're given a mortgage holiday, if you like. But that's got to come to an end at some stage, and that's when I think things are going to get bad and people will lose their homes, and banks will be repossessing properties like in the last recession and previous recessions, when I knew lots of people that lost their homes, that were made bankrupt. And when you lose your home, if there's negative equity there because the banks will sell off your home at an auction, then you're not necessarily let off that debt. They can still pursue you for that debt that you owe, the negative equity. So in other words, if you have a home that now you think is worth 500,000 and you have a mortgage of 400,000, you think that's pretty safe. You've got 20% equity there, 80% mortgage, even a 75% mortgage. When that property is repossessed and it goes to auction, it might be sold for less than 400,000. It might be sold for 350 to a cash buyer. And then there's charges on top of that. There's interest accruing. There's administration charges, charges to sell the property, legal fees, and you name it. And that the debt then could increase, and the amount that the property sells for might not clear the debt. And many people are in a position where they've got 90% mortgages and 100% mortgages, and the property has gone down in value, and that negative equity, then the lender says, well, we've got most of our money back, but we want the rest of it. And that's when they can pursue people even through the bankruptcy courts. So we're going to see a lot of, in fact, administrators and bankruptcy accountancy firms and people like that, and they're going to be doing quite well out of this. In recessions, their business is going to boom, and that's what I can see happening, because I've lived through it before. So I'm not just making this up. I've seen this before in the 80s, and the 90s was a bad one. And I think this feels to me like it's going to be a bad one, because I can't see a quick end to not only to the virus, but a quick end to the economy getting restarted and rebooted. And even if it does, we've still had maybe 6 months or maybe even a year by the time it ends of lost business. And once confidence goes, then that's when it's very hard to get that back. So let's see. I mean, the government are trying their best. I could be wrong. Maybe all these measures, these multi-billion pound and trillion pound printed money schemes will work, but that has to be paid for in some way later on down the line, doesn't it? It's not free money. Them printing money and just giving it out here left, right and centre has to be covered in some way. It has to be paid back, and that's what worries me. It also devalues the value of your money, your pound or dollar in your pocket. And of course, in the third world, it's even worse. I mean, they are just really, really suffering. And I saw a documentary about South America where billions, it's about 70 million people have been taken out of poverty in the last 10, 20 years. And that's all gone. In America, 5 years of growth is gone. And if you think, we were talking about Brazil being one of the top economies in the world in the last few years now, and they're really suffering. Argentina has just gone into a massive debt restructuring. This is where banks and bondholders have lent money to countries like Argentina, and that's going to be restructured as well because they just can't pay it back. And that's just the first of them, the first country I've seen like that. So I'm sorry it's all doom and gloom here, but we've got to be aware of what might be coming. We've got to tighten our belts, and unfortunately that might affect the economy in a knock-on effect, which is also affecting restaurants. But people have to think of themselves. You have to tighten your belt. You have to preserve your cash, save your cash, because I think this could be a long winter ahead. So once again, I'm sorry it's a bit of doom and gloom, but that's the way it is. However, if you're an investor, there could be a lot of opportunities. There could be a lot of opportunities in property to perhaps convert redundant offices, redundant buildings into housing, into residential use. I mean, for instance, this industrial estate here is ripe for housing. It would make a great little housing development. It's opposite some land there. I mean, it is. I'm not saying it should be, because I think we need jobs as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 10 years this goes to housing. It's just the way it's going. But there will be opportunities for those who are sitting on cash, or for those who are able to get money together, because it's not just about having your own cash. Sometimes it's about mobilizing investors, and like the famous Jim Slater did when he was made bankrupt. I think it was back in the 70s or 80s. Jim Slater was a mentor to Sir James Goldsmith, the father of Zach Goldsmith, the MP. And Goldsmith was a billionaire, corporate raider. Jim Slater was his mentor. Something went wrong with Jim Slater's insurance company that he owned, and he went bankrupt. However, in the next few years, he got all his fortune back again, because he was able to gather investors together, and he went into property development in the Fulham area, redeveloping old warehouses into high-end flats. And within a few years, he'd bounced back, and that's because he had the knowledge. All right, you might say, well, he had the contacts, but he could have just gone away and hidden in a corner and in a fetal position and said, "I'm." I think I lost the connection there. So I will wrap it up now. So have a great day, and remember that whenever there's a crisis, there's also an opportunity, and that's the time you've got to be aware. You've got to be educated. And if you want to know how to get into property, if you want to know how to get into property without even using your own money, then just drop me a line, charles@charleskelly.net, or connect with me here on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. Okay, thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye for now.